The video that destroyed my world. I never thought the end of my world would come through a phone screen. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon in late September. The sun was slipping low over the old barn at Haven Paws, casting long golden beams across the concrete floor. I was kneeling beside Scout, our three-legged terrier, carefully measuring his evening medication. My hands smelled of antiseptic and wet fur. The familiar sounds surrounded me: soft whimpers, the rustle of hay, the occasional tail thump against a kennel door. This place had been my home for 9 years. My heart, my everything. My phone leaned against a half-empty bag of kibble, playing in the background while I worked. I wasn't really paying attention until the video title caught my eye. A New Beginning for Animals in Need. I tapped play. There they stood, Ronan Hale and Calista Wren, side by side in front of a sleek, modern rescue center I had never seen before. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows sparkled under bright lights. A brand new silver sign read, "Second Chance Haven." Ronan wore the navy sweater I had given him last Christmas. Callista's hair fell perfectly over her shoulders, her smile radiant and confident. "We're incredibly proud to finally open our doors to the public," Ronan said, his voice warm and steady, the same voice that used to tell me everything would be okay after a long, difficult day. This center represents years of dedicated research into breakthrough healing methods for traumatized and injured animals. Calista nodded beside him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "These methods have changed lives," she added smoothly. "We couldn't have come this far without the incredible inspiration we received along the way. Thank you to everyone who believed in the power of second chances." They smiled at the camera. They never mentioned my name. Not once. The syringe slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the concrete. Scout lifted his head, ears twitching at the sound. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened so sharply I thought my ribs might crack. I stared at the screen as the video continued playing, Ronan gesturing proudly toward the new facility, Calista laughing softly at something off camera, both of them glowing with accomplishment. My method, my 9 years of research, my sleepless nights spent documenting every small progress with broken animals, my careful trials, my tears, my handwritten notes stained with coffee and antiseptic. All of it was now wrapped in their shiny new story. I sat frozen on the dirty barn floor, surrounded by the dogs and cats I had rescued and healed with my own hands, the same hands that were now trembling uncontrollably. A wave of nausea rolled through me. My throat burned. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Every word they spoke felt like another piece of me being quietly erased. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just stealing money or time. They had taken the one thing I had poured my entire soul into, the only place where I had ever felt truly useful, truly alive, and made it theirs. The video ended. The screen went dark for a moment, then suggested the next clip. Touring our new healing center with Ronan and Calista. I closed my eyes tightly. Tears I didn't want to cry burned behind my lids. 9 years. 9 years of believing that if I loved hard enough, worked hard enough, gave enough of myself, it would matter. That the people I loved would see me, that they would never hurt me like this, but they had, and they had done it with smiles on their faces. I pressed my muddy hands against my thighs, trying to stop the shaking. Scout whimpered again and nudged his cold nose against my wrist, sensing something was wrong. I looked down at him, this small, broken dog. I had fought so hard to save, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely hollow. When the people closest to you take the very heart of who you are and claim it as their own, what are you supposed to do? How the kindest parts of me were turned into weapons against me, and how I finally decided that my heart, no matter how badly it was broken, still had the strength to fight back. Because sometimes, the greatest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people you built your whole world around. And sometimes, that world has to burn before you can rebuild something stronger. The evidence hidden in plain sight. That night, the barn felt colder than it had ever been. I stayed long after the sun went down. The animals had been fed and settled, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. I sat on the old wooden bench near the medicine cabinet, phone still clutched in my hand, the video paused on Ronan's smiling face. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long time before I finally started digging. I didn't cry. Not yet. Something inside me had gone very quiet, very still. The same kind of quiet I felt when I was treating a badly injured animal and knew one wrong move could end its life. I had spent 9 years learning how to observe every small detail. How a dog's ears twitched when it was scared. How a cat's breathing changed when it was in pain. Now I turned that same careful attention toward the truth I didn't want to see. It didn't take long. I started with the public posts, then the private donor pages, then the shared cloud folders I still had access to from when Ronan helped me organize files last year. One by one, the pieces appeared. Every single medical record from the past 3 years had been copied. Every video I had taken of rehabilitation sessions, the slow progress of broken legs, the trust-building exercises with traumatized rescues was there, neatly relabeled with new dates and new names. Even the special formula I had spent months perfecting in my tiny backroom lab, the one that helped animals with severe anxiety recover faster, was listed under Second Chance Protocol. They hadn't just taken the idea. They had taken everything. My stomach twisted as I scrolled through donor lists. Names I had spent years building relationships with people who trusted me because they saw how much I cared were now being courted by Ronan and Calista. Some had already made large donations to the new center. Then came the whispers. Subtle comments on social media. Private messages forwarded to me by a few loyal volunteers. I heard Selene hasn't been herself lately. Someone said she's been struggling with the pressure. Maybe it's best if she steps back for a while. The words were never direct, never signed, but they all pointed in the same direction, painting me as unstable, unreliable, perhaps even dishonest with the rescue's funds. I sat there in the dim light of the barn, reading line after line, feeling each one land like a small, precise cut. The worst part came when I opened an old email thread between Ronan and Calista. It went back almost 2 years. Calista had written, "Harlow's condition is getting worse. We can use that. If we frame it gently, people will understand why Selene needs time away. They'll see it as us being caring. Harlow Reed. My mother. They were using my mother's serious illness. The woman who had supported me from the very first day I opened Haven Paws as a tool to make their takeover look compassionate. I closed the laptop slowly. My hands were steady now. Too steady. The shaking from earlier had been replaced by something colder, clearer. I thought of Calista, the woman I had welcomed into my home like a sister, the one who used to sit on the barn floor with me at midnight, bottle-feeding orphaned kittens while we talked about life, the one I had trusted with my deepest fears and my proudest moments. She had been planning this with Ronan for a very long time. The loneliness hit me then, hard and heavy. I was surrounded by dozens of animals I had saved, yet I had never felt more alone. The people I loved most had looked at everything I built and decided it would look better without me in it. But somewhere in that deep, aching silence, something else began to shift. The fog of shock started to lift. In its place came a cold, quiet clarity I had never felt before. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was seeing every detail, every lie, every careful move they had made. My phone buzzed softly on the bench. A message from Elias Thorne, my old mentor, the man who had taught me everything about ethical animal rescue work years ago. "Selene, I saw the video. Something feels wrong. Are you okay? Call me when you can." It was the first kind word I had received all day. I stared at the message for a long moment, then looked around the barn at the animals sleeping peacefully in their kennels, at the worn notebooks filled with my own handwriting, at the small lab where I had created something real. I wasn't ready to cry yet. I wasn't ready to scream. But I was ready to stop being the only one who didn't see what was happening. This is the moment many of us reach when the people we trusted turn our greatest strength into their opportunity. The moment we realize that surviving betrayal isn't just about enduring the pain, it's about deciding, quietly and fiercely, what we will never allow to be taken from us again. And for me, that decision had just begun. The quiet decision. The nights that followed were the longest I had ever known. I barely slept. Instead, I walked slowly between the kennels after midnight, the only light coming from a single hanging bulb that cast soft shadows across the concrete. I stopped at each one, looking at the animals I had pulled back from the edge, the fearful ones, the broken ones, the ones no one else wanted. They slept peacefully now, trusting the safety I had built for them. And I realized I could no longer pretend everything was going to be okay. I wasn't going to beg Ronan to come back to me. I wasn't going to keep silent and hope the truth would somehow fix itself. Something inside me had shifted. The woman who had always put everyone else first, her husband, her mother, the rescue, even Calista, was quietly stepping aside. In her place, a much colder, clearer version of myself was waking up. On the fourth night, I made the call. Elowen Sage answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm, professional, and carried the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years protecting non-profit organizations from exactly this kind of quiet theft. I didn't cry on the phone. I simply told her what I had found. She listened without interrupting, then said the words that sealed my decision. "Selene, if you're ready to protect what's yours, I can help you do it the right way." From that moment, I stopped reacting and started preparing. I worked in silence. During the day, I kept Haven Paws running, as usual, feeding, cleaning, treating wounds, smiling gently at volunteers. But every night, after the last volunteer left, I sat in the small office with the door locked and began collecting everything. Screenshots, timestamps, original files with my handwriting, emails, financial trails. I organized them with the same careful patience I used when nursing a sick animal back to health slowly, methodically, leaving nothing to chance. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Little Maya Reed walked into the barn holding her mother's hand. She was 12 years old, quiet and serious, with the same gentle eyes she had the day I first met her. 2 years ago, I had saved her golden retriever, Max, after he was hit by a car. Maya had never forgotten it. She came straight to me and spoke in a small, steady voice. "Miss Selene, I tried to adopt a puppy from the new center. The one Mr. Hale and Miss Wren opened. They said no. They told me the puppy was only for people who could give him a perfect image home. They said my family wasn't suitable." Her words landed like a stone in still water. I looked down at this brave little girl who had once cried in my arms when Max was fighting for his life. She had come to me for help then, and now she was standing here again, confused and hurt by the very people who claim to care about second chances. In that moment, something inside me finally broke open and then clicked shut. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Scout, for Max, for every animal that would be turned away because they didn't fit the perfect picture Ronan and Calista wanted to sell. And for every person like Maya who believed in real kindness, only to have it taken away. That night, after Maya left, I stood alone in the center of the barn. The animals were quiet. A soft breeze moved through the open doors, carrying the familiar scent of hay and warm fur. I walked slowly from kennel to kennel, pausing in front of each one. Some of the dogs lifted their heads and watched me with trusting eyes. A few cats blinked sleepily from their perches. I stopped in the middle of the aisle, took a deep breath, and spoke softly into the stillness. "I promise you, I will not let them use this place, or any of you, ever again. Not for their image, not for their lies. This is still our home, and I'm going to protect it." The words came out barely above a whisper, but they felt heavier than anything I had ever said in my life. I wasn't loud. I wasn't angry in that moment. I was simply done being small. For the first time in weeks, the fear that had lived in my chest began to make room for something else, a quiet, burning resolve that grew stronger with every breath. I didn't know yet how far I would have to go, but standing there in the soft light of the only place that had ever truly felt like mine, I made a silent vow. The woman who used to shrink herself to keep the peace was gone, and whatever came next, I was ready to face it. The trap that couldn't be seen. I no longer waited for the next blow to fall. Instead, I began to set the board myself slowly, carefully, the way I once bandaged a shattered paw, knowing every layer mattered. With Elowin Sage guiding me in the shadows and Draven Holt quietly opening doors within the larger charity world, I prepared a detailed, independent audit of Second Chance Haven. We didn't rush. We built it like a careful diagnosis, every copied file, every redirected donation, every altered timestamp documented with cold precision. But the real trap was softer, almost invisible. I started letting small, harmless-looking mistakes slip through the cracks in their system. A mislabeled expense here. A slightly inflated supply order there. Nothing dramatic enough to raise immediate alarms, but enough to make Ronan and Calista feel untouchable. I watched from a distance as their confidence grew. Ronan began spending more freely from the new donations. Bigger events, fancier equipment, longer promotional trips. Each new purchase tightened the invisible net around them. I felt the shift in my own body. The constant ache in my chest had changed. It was no longer just pain. It had sharpened into focus. Then came the night of the fundraiser at Haven Paws. The old barn had never looked more alive. Soft string lights hung between the beams. Fresh straw covered the floor. The animals were clean and calm, watching curiously from their open kennels as guests in quiet, expensive clothes moved between tables of simple food and donation cards. I had invited the exact donors Ronan and Calista had been courting for weeks, the ones with deep pockets and even deeper values. I stood near the entrance in a plain black sweater, my hair tied back the way I always wore it when working late. No spotlight, no speech, just quiet nods and gentle smiles as people greeted me. Ronan and Calista arrived late. I saw them the moment they stepped through the wide barn doors. Ronan's face tightened when he recognized several major donors already laughing with volunteers. Callista's perfect smile faltered for half a second before she recovered, linking her arm through his. They thought they were walking into another opportunity. They had no idea they were walking into my carefully built moment. The evening moved gently forward. People petted the animals. Children laughed. Donations were quietly written. Then, near the end, little Maya Reed walked to the small wooden platform we had set up. She was wearing her favorite blue dress, clutching a folded piece of paper in her small hands. The room quieted as she began to speak. 2 weeks ago, I tried to adopt a puppy from the new center, she said, her voice clear but soft. They told me no. They said the puppy needed a perfect image home and that my family wasn't suitable. But Miss Selene saved my dog Max when no one else would. She never asked if we were perfect. A hush fell over the barn. Cameras flashed. Phones rose. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I stood perfectly still near the back wall, the warm light catching the side of my face. Between the occasional bark and the soft shuffle of paws on straw, I watched Ronan's expression change. His jaw clenched. Callista's hand tightened on his sleeve. For the first time, real fear flickered behind their polished smiles. They still didn't know it was me. Not fully, but they could feel the ground shifting beneath them. As the evening ended and guests began to leave, I caught Ronan's eye across the barn for one brief moment. He looked at me, really looked, and in that instant I saw the first crack of recognition. Not anger yet, something closer to unease. A man who had grown used to me being quiet and accommodating was suddenly facing a version of me he didn't understand. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. My eyes stayed steady, calm and cold, in a way that only came after too many nights of staring at the truth. The tension coiled tighter in my chest, but it no longer felt like fear. It felt like control. Ronan and Calista left that night believing they could still fix the narrative. They had no idea the audit report was already finished, that Draven Holt had already reviewed it, that the net I had been weaving so quietly was about to close. And I stood alone in the barn long after everyone was gone, listening to the soft breathing of the animals around me, feeling the weight of what I had just begun. The woman who once shrank to keep peace was now the one deciding how the story would end. And the next chapter was coming faster than they could possibly imagine. The morning after everything burned. The report was released on a gray Thursday morning. It didn't come with shouting or dramatic press conferences. It simply appeared quiet, thorough, and impossible to ignore. An independent audit signed by respected names in the nonprofit world. Every copied record, every redirected donation, every carefully altered document laid bare in black and white. By afternoon, Ronan Hale and Calista Wren were called before the charity board and a small group of major donors. I didn't attend. I stayed at Haven Paws, washing bowls and changing bandages as if it were any other day. But I felt the shift in the air, like the moment before a storm finally breaks. They tried to explain. They offered carefully worded statements. But the evidence was too complete, too precise. The board saw what Ronan and Calista had done, how they had used the language of rescue to hide personal ambition, how donor funds had quietly moved to support an image instead of the animals. By the end of the week, Second Chance Haven was temporarily suspended. Ronan stepped down from any leadership role. Calista was asked to leave the organization. The glossy new building with its shining glass walls stood strangely quiet. I never spoke publicly against them. I let the truth speak for itself. A few days later, Ronan asked to meet me one last time. We sat on the old wooden bench outside the barn at Haven Paws, the same bench where we once dreamed about the future together. The late afternoon light filtered through the trees, soft and golden. He looked tired, smaller somehow. The confident man from the videos was gone. He spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. "Selene, I never meant for it to go this far. We got caught up. I thought we could build something bigger. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Please, tell me there's still a way to fix this between us." I listened without interrupting. Every word he said carried the weight of old memories, late nights when he held me after we lost an animal, the way he used to laugh when a puppy climbed into his lap. For a moment, a flicker of the old pain rose in my chest, but it didn't swallow me. When he finished, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, faded photograph. It was taken on the very first day Haven Paws opened me, much younger, kneeling in the dirt with a tiny, abandoned puppy in my arms. Its eyes still frightened but beginning to trust. I placed the photo gently in his hands. Ronan stared at it for a long time. His fingers trembled slightly. He looked up at me, eyes glassy, waiting for me to speak, to yell, to cry, to accuse. I said nothing. The silence stretched between us, heavy and final. In that quiet, everything unsaid passed between us. The years we shared, the betrayal, the love that had slowly turned into something unrecognizable. Finally, he lowered his head and whispered, "I understand." He stood up slowly and walked away without another word. I watched his back until he disappeared down the gravel path. Then I closed my eyes and let out a breath. I felt like I had been holding for months. It was over. The next morning I sat on the front porch of the old barn as the sun rose over the fields. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the soft sounds of waking animals. Birds called from the trees. A light breeze moved through the open doors. Harlow Reed, my mother, arrived first. She moved more slowly these days, but her eyes were clear and warm as she sat beside me. Not long after, Elias Thorne pulled up in his old truck. And then came Maya Reed, running ahead with Max trotting happily beside her. Maya laughed as she chased one of the younger dogs across the grass, her joy bright and uncomplicated. Max barked playfully, tail wagging wildly. I watched them all, my mother's quiet strength, Elias's steady presence, Maya's innocent laughter, and something deep inside me finally softened. This was what justice felt like. Not destruction, not revenge that left only ashes. It was reclaiming myself, protecting what I had built with love, refusing to shrink anymore so others could feel bigger. I was no longer the woman who stayed silent to keep the peace. I was no longer the one who gave everything away, hoping it would be enough. I had found my strength in the very place I thought had broken me, in the pain, in the betrayal, and in the quiet, stubborn kindness that refused to die. As the sun climbed higher, warming the wooden boards beneath me, I looked out over Haven Paws, the place that had always been mine, and felt peace settle gently into my bones. The animals were safe. The truth had been told, and I was finally free to begin again. This is the truth so many of us need to hear. Real justice isn't about burning everything down. It's about rising from the ashes, still carrying the light you almost lost, and using it to protect what truly matters. I smiled softly as Maya's laughter rang across the yard. For the first time, in a very long time, the morning felt like a beginning. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso Legal. Disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.